Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the first public hearing of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions, and Statutory Authorities, including the THA, and this is the 13th Parliament. Now, the committee is appointed pursuant to Section 66A of the Constitution and further empowered by the standing orders of the House of Representatives and the Senate to, among other things, investigate, inquire into, and report on all matters relating to the mandate, management activities, administration, and operations of assigned ministries, departments, or bodies. And in undertaking its mandate, these joint select committees are empowered to send for persons, papers, and records, or in other words, this committee is empowered to request that public officials appear before it to respond to any questions the committee may have and produce any documents deemed necessary by the committee to assist in its investigation or deliberations, save for a few exceptions. Today's hearing is this committee's first for this 13th Parliament. It has been convened pursuant to the committee's inquiry into the operational efficiency of the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Members of the public can send in comments, and members of the listening and viewing audience are invited to post and send these comments via the Parliament's various social media platforms, Facebook page, ParlView, the Parliament's YouTube channel, and X, formerly Twitter. So now I wish to invite Ms. Charles-Elbourne to introduce herself and her team. Ms. Elbourne is from the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members, honorable members of this committee, Permanent Secretary, representatives of the MOWI. Today, with us from the Port Authority, we have myself. I am Marcia Charles-Elbourne, the CEO of the Port of Port of Spain, Ms. Candice Batiste, Mr. Lenin Oliver, the CEO Pasenco, Ms. Deidre Singh, Senior Legal Officer, and Ms. Raquel Ramsaran, our Executive Manager of Finance. Just to give a few opening words, if you may permit me, Chairman. On behalf of the board, the management, and the employees, I wish to thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee today. As a public institution and a part of the critical national infrastructure for Trinidad and Tobago, the authority remains committed to its duty of national service to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Chair, the management of the Port Authority appreciates the committee's focus on our operations, and we welcome this forum to provide clarity on the work of the authority, including ongoing developments and operational realities of the Port Authority. We recognize that the Port Authority is often under public scrutiny, particularly as the operations affect the wider business community. So we are grateful for this opportunity to come before you today. We are committed to transparency and accountability, and we look forward to the committee's questions. On behalf of the board and the management and our employees, thank you for the opportunity today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Ms. Elbourne. At this time, I would like to now invite Mr. Ramdahan to introduce himself and his team from the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure, and to also provide us with a brief introduction and opening remarks.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, honorable members of this committee, participants at the hearing, and representatives of the Port Authority, Trinidad and Tobago. My name is Ian Ramdahan. I'm the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure, and attending with me is Mr. Ronald Alfred. He's the Director of Maritime Services. Ms. Maureen Ram, our Senior Legal Officer too, and Ms. Candida Hart, our Senior Planning Officer. I thank you for this invitation to appear before the committee as it examines the operational efficiency of the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. This is also a core area of interest on the Ministry's agenda. The Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago is is a key organization managing our national port infrastructure and serving as a critical economic prime mover, serving maritime trade, logistics, and national development. As the line ministry with responsibility for overseeing public infrastructure and major national projects, we maintain a close working relationship with the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and its stakeholders. The ministry is committed to supporting state entities under its purview with achieving operational excellence, sustainability, and improved service delivery, and recognize that the Port Authority is essential not only for promoting sustainable trade, activities related to import and export, but also serving an integral role in our country's transportation network, national employment drive, border control, and regulatory compliance, which ultimately supports national productivity, economic resilience, and a safer society. In recent years, the ministry has collaborated with the Port Authority on several key initiatives aimed at modernizing the infrastructure at the Port of Port of Spain that would have resulted in enhanced operational protocols and ensured alignment with the national development goals. The ministry recognized that the Port of Scarborough, which is also under the remit of the Port Authority, is also a key strategic asset, and we will follow up with the Port Authority and key stakeholders in Tobago to ensure that we support the tourism sector, the inter-island transport, commercial shipping, and other key areas of interest. The Ministry of Works and Infrastructure remains dedicated to collaborating with partners and partnering with Port Authority for fostering an environment of productivity, accountability, transparency, and continuous improvement for advancing a national goal of making Trinidad and Tobago a global hub that interconnects all ports across the country with the wider regional community and international stakeholders. My team and I are here today to assist this joint select committee in the examination of the operational efficiency of the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and to provide the relevant support for this inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramdahan. And at this time, I'd like to, for the benefit of the listening and viewing public, to remind us of the objectives of the inquiry. And these are to examine the strategic direction and modernization efforts of the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, to examine the operational performance of the port over the last 5 years and the performance indicators used to measure its performance, to examine the crisis management strategies and protocols of the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and to evaluate the adequacy of the legislative framework governing the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago's operations. Now, before we begin today's deliberations, I would like to remind both committee members and officials to direct their questions and concerns through the chair. And on that note, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Candace Jones-Simmons, independent senator and chair of this committee, and I'd like to invite my fellow members to introduce themselves, starting with Madam Vice Chair.
Good afternoon to you, Chair, and those of you joining us, member of the committee, and also member for Chaguanas East.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm David Joseph Thomas, Member of Parliament, Tobago East, and member of this committee.
Good afternoon. I am Prakash Prasad, Senator and member of this committee.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Through you, good afternoon, everyone. I am Kareem Marcel. I'm the Member of Parliament for Laventille West, and I'm a member of this committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Natalie Chaitan Maharaj, member and senator.
So I'd like to remind all contributors to today's deliberations, please activate your mics when you are acknowledged and turn it off when you've concluded your contributions. And so, with that said, we'd like to proceed with questions under the strategic direction and modernization efforts of the Port Authority. I would like to invite Member Dr. Triton Mirage to raise any questions that she has on this topic.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Through you, the submission by the Port Authorities has stated that the strategic plan was last updated in October 2023, and it is to cover the period 2024 through 2029. However, periodic reviews are undertaken to ensure alignment with the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago's overarching national strategic objectives. So given the recent change in the government, assuming office in May of last year, have any discussions been held regarding any proposed adjustments to the current strategic plan?
Through the Chair, so the review of the strategic plans are ongoing, and it's on a continuous basis. So the public would be advised recently there was the rollout of the revitalization. So the Port Authority's review ongoing at this time would be in alignment with that. Previously, we were looking at a PPP model, which is still being determined at this time, but right now the focus will be on that revitalization.
Yes, Mr. Marcel?
Deeply grateful, Madam Chair, and through you. Ms. Elbourne, based on your response in relation to the PPP arrangement that was under consideration by the port, could you shed some light in terms of the stakeholders that were involved in this proposed PPP arrangement, please?
Just to know, the previous arrangement would have been undertaken by the previous administration. It was led by the IDB at the then time, and there were also various partners involved, including the Ministry of Public Administration. So the undertaking did not only involve the Port Authority, but a number of government stakeholders as well, agencies, including the Line Ministry, Ministry of Works and Infrastructure. Through the Chair, I can advise that a tender would have been issued, and it was at that stage that we are currently at, the submission of bids, and that is still to be determined, and that's where it's at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Charles-Elbourne. I'd now like to invite Member Professor Prasad.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and through you, I know the CEO said that the new strategic plan is being developed, right? But the modernization efforts, that is ongoing. I think it becomes part of this plan also. Am I correct?
Yes, Chair. Modernization of ports is ongoing in order to remain competitive in the market regionally and internationally. That modernization trust has to be ongoing.
So then can I kindly ask, what is the status of the modernization in terms of throughput in unloading containers? Is there any effort there and any technology is being used?
I'll pass that question through the Chair to the CEO Papers, but I will say I'm very pleased to advise that we did have 357,000 TEUs at the Port of Spain for 2025, and that represented our largest volume handled in over 11 years.
Through the Chair, good afternoon. So as the GM would have stated, we continually look at our operation in terms of being able to facilitate the requirement of the demand of shipping. So within the last 3 years, we have seen significant growth in shipping, particularly in the regional market. And this is representative in terms of the volumes that we are now seeing. Our highest volumes handled at the Port of Spain thus far is 400,000. So to be at 500 and almost 60,000 is very close to our previous figure in 2014. And with that, we are looking at every area in terms of technology. So on the technological side, our organization employs a terminal operating system that is real-time. This system manages every aspect of our operation, and it also integrates with the stakeholders. So the shipping lines, the hauliers, the brokers, they all have that real-time interface with our terminal to be able to determine where the cargo is in terms of the process, as well as to be able to make appointments. So we are continually looking at various aspects. Right now on the burner, we have the port community system in which we are liaising with the Ministry of Trade. So in tandem to what the GM would have said with regards to the strategic direction and the modernization plan, we continue to move towards progressing the Port of Trinidad and Tobago towards that direction as other regional modern ports. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chairman, through you again.
Certainly, proceed.
You said you're going up to, you have reached 500,000 as opposed to, well, your units, right? And you use
400.
400. You use in 2014 as a sort of benchmark. So how did you achieve that? If you're going to modernize, is it your operators, crane operators are more effective now? And also, can you answer or give some indication that if you use modern technology, I mean, what is, for instance, to be more specific, what is the average time of unloading for a container now? Is it an hour, half an hour, 3 hours? And what is the sort of most efficient time if you use technology compared to worldwide?
Okay, thank you. Through the chair. So in terms of the port operations on a whole, there are various key performance indicators that are used to measure port performance. The major one is your volumes, because it shows, of course, your growth, your capacity. So when we speak of 357,000 going towards our previous benchmark of 400,000, we are talking in terms of the amount of cargo that we are handling as a port. That basically indicates, one, that we are positioned for cargo. Port of Port of Spain handles 70% of transshipment cargo, which is regional cargo. So we have seen significant growth in the region, predominantly Guyana, Suriname. There's a lot of transshipment that would 70% of the transshipment going to Guyana and Suriname pass through Trinidad and Tobago. And we are capturing a lot of that cargo. So in terms of the increase in volume, it is more demand for regional cargo, nearshoring, redirecting. When we talk about productivity, we are looking at berth moves per hour, crane moves per hour, waiting time, those type of KPIs. So where we are, generally, we are benchmarking ourselves to regional benchmarks, of course, based on studies, and we are doing about 65%. And again, that has to do with the configuration of our organization. So right now, we are presently at a capacity of 80% in terms of what we can handle. In shipping and port, once your organization, once your port reach a capacity of 75%, the efficiency drops because you need space to be able to maneuver the equipment and to be able to plan. We do a segregation strategy with our cargo, meaning that cargo is segregated based on Guyana, Suriname, imports, so you would need a lot of space. So right now, in terms of our performance, we are doing about 75% based on the international benchmark at this time.
Chairperson, through you. Again, I'm a bit confused. That happens to me often. And if right now you're reaching 75%, which you say is a sort of saturation point, unless you get some sort of increased facilities at the port, then what is the purpose of modernization now? If you've reached it with your existing labor and technology, what is the purpose of your modernization if you've reached that already? I'm a bit confused. I know maybe I don't get it quite clearly, but if you can explain that, please.
Through the chair, the purpose of modernization is to enhance customer service delivery. So we're talking about faster cranes, faster delivery of cargo on the ground. We're talking about enhanced customer service in terms of the sheds. So we've introduced through Navis a general cargo module. So persons can log in, brokers, see which part of the sheds or part of the port their goods are kept, make an appointment for delivery. So the modernization efforts has been undertaken a lot in terms of the technology, in terms of the equipment acquisition. We are moving towards green efficiency. So those are the areas exactly.
Say through you again, last question. I wouldn't pursue that because it's not clear to me still. But talking about green technology, with regard to the reduction of JSC gases, greenhouse gases, on the port equipment and actually on the trucks on the port, any progress in that area or any efforts in that area?
Through the chair, I'll have the equipment manager answer that because we are prepared.
Through the chair, in terms of working towards sustainability and green energy, all our ship-to-shore cranes are all electric. And the last acquisition of rubber tire gantry crane, we went to a hybrid model where we have a small internal combustion engine and the major part of the crane is electrified. We have 2 new pieces of equipment that we just tendered for and which is on the way. Those are fully internal combustion engines at tier 5 that uses ultra-low sulfur diesel. And in terms of vehicles, we have done some all-electric vehicles also.
I see. And Chair, this is the last question. As we say in Trinidad.
Proceed, member.
In terms of the trucks that come in, because all these hauliers have diesel engines, and I mean, if you see them, they have a nice, black smoke on at the end. What's been done about those people who come on the port? Through you, Chair.
Certainly proceed, Mr.
Okay, just to clarify, the modernization effort, which is linked to the revitalization plan, is to make Trinidad and Tobago a global hub. Just as Singapore is a global hub, we are the global hub. We position Trinidad and Tobago to be the hub for North and South America, right? We intend to do that. You have to have efficiency in terms of import-exports. You need to have area spaces to support containers, lay down parking. So one of the big problems we have, trucks are basically coming to the Port of Port-of-Spain and they're just on the side of the shoulder and they're just causing traffic in units, right? So there's one of the programs that the ministry want to have is a parking facility where trucks will go and park and then be called to when time to load their cargoes and whatever, right? So they don't find themselves on the roads. And part of revitalization too, yes, the greening, environmental is big. There's the global push from IMO for the net zero for ships, right? Go more low emissions, more renewable. And Director of Maritime Services, he knows more about that. So there's this global effort to reduce the emissions from the shipping sector.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Member Mohit, I believe you had a question. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. To members joining us today, strategic plan is geared really towards, improvement, and I'm seeing based on what you presented, your focus on customer service. What we would like to hear today, because I'm sure many stakeholders and corporate entities are looking on here, and I would really like to hear some of your priority projects. Now, I heard you mention some just now, but in terms of priority and really improving customer service for those persons who utilize the port, can you outline that here for us?
Thank you, through the chair. So in terms of priority for the customer service efforts, we have introduced, so you no longer come to the port unexpectedly. We are expecting you through our online appointment system. This is done for persons collecting barrels at the shed. This is done for containerized cargo as well. So we have digitalized the appointment system, and you determine when you come. So we give a list of appointment slots, and you select your hours. We have done upgrades to our Navis terminal system. Navis is one of the top terminal systems used at the benchmark ports throughout the world. So We previously did not include general cargo, so this is basically persons coming to clear loose cargo, like vehicles, for instance. This is also an appointment system. We have started direct stakeholder engagement. The team would have visited Guyana and Suriname, so we're no longer trying to manage report from a customer service perspective from afar. We do weekly calls with the business chambers. We would have met with the Shipping Association last week. So part of the customer service is us coming to the ground and getting your real live issues and addressing it. We have introduced as well through the marketing department, we have set up direct lines with customers and assigned basically an agent. So we have persons within the marketing department and they have strategic business partners. So let's say persons who do high volume, Nestle, for instance, Carib, just giving an example. So you would call in to say, hey, I have 10 containers on the ground. Can you give me an update? And these are one-on-one liaisons that happens with the team. So we're becoming very customer focused driven. We do calls, we do visits, and it's a whole integrated approach now, as well as the introduction of the digitalized manner in which we serve you. So that is where we get at.
Sure. Thank you. And one more question, so we don't have to go over that again. I heard when you, Ms. Batiste, if I'm correct, when you were responding to Senator Prasad's questions, you mentioned the 75% capacity limit, which you are at now, in terms of modernization and so on. Sticking to the customer service and the service delivery aspect of it, what I would really like to get from this committee today is how does this really affect that 75% capacity productivity? How does it affect productivity and service quality? And what contingency strategies you have in place to deal with such and to ensure that it is continuously improved, if I may say?
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for that question. So just to clarify, based on international studies, a port is considered over its capacity when it is at 75% in terms of its volume. We are currently at 85% in terms of the volumes that we have. In some areas, particularly the empty storage containers, we are well over 100% of containers stored at our facility. What that means is that immediately you would start to see your efficiency begin to drop, because it is going to require more rehandles, more shifting to be able to manage that type of operation. When you are at that capacity, it's a bit more challenging. Of course, it is going to impact your productivity because you will have your equipment, your cranes, everything is going to take longer. In terms of that, so what are we doing? Firstly, because the Port of Port of Spain is a transshipment hub for the southernmost part of the Caribbean, we are actually handling a lot of the volumes from Asia to the Port of Port of Spain that is now redistributed to the smaller islands. Those vessels are what we call mainliners. So those vessels would bring a large amount of cargo, and that cargo would be distributed through feeder vessels to the smaller islands. So it's a different system. So some of the things that we are doing right now is basically trying to segment that type of operation, because the feeder operation is a bit more challenging because of the type of vessels that are being used for this. It's mainly what they call non-cellular vessels. So those are general cargo vessels where you would normally put like chipwood in. They're trying to load containers in these vessels. So it decreases our productivity. So the recent strategies that we are looking at is, one, being able to segment the more efficient vessels from the non-efficient vessels operation, so that we can increase the productivity on the mainliners that are much larger, and then remove the smaller vessels to the mobile operation, as well as we are looking at reconfiguring our yard. So this, of course, requires space, Recently, we have implemented a policy to deal with the amount of empties that we are storing at our terminal so that we can get space to do things like buffering and staging. So once you are at that point, you have to look at reconfiguring your operations to be able to keep that efficiency. But what I want to assure the committee and Trinidad and Tobago, our system allows us to monitor productivity by the hour, and we can respond to those challenges immediately when we see bottlenecks and slowdown in our operation.
One more question in terms of the appointment system for those who utilize the port, as you mentioned earlier. How is that system working? Is it an efficient system? At times you have clogs in that system where appointments are not available, like other entities where we see that happening.
Through the chair, actually, since we've introduced the appointment system, we are at 60% utilization, meaning on a day-to-day basis, we have about 40% of the slots remaining empty. Persons, we have realized, tend not to choose the early hours to come into Port of Spain. So we find that early window between 7 and 10 to sometimes be empty. They prefer to come into Port of Spain after the traffic hours, but we are at 60% utilization.
And through the chair, if I may just add, our appointment system is actually from 7 in the morning to 11 in the night.
Member Chaitamraj, I acknowledge you.
Through the chair, piggybacking on Minister Mohit's question and the online appointment system not being used at full capacity, is there still a situation where you have walk-ins? Is there a facility to manage that, and is attempt being made to make sure that the public is aware of everything just stated in terms of the online system now and its hours?
So it is based on where your cargo is being delivered. So example, we can facilitate walk-ins at like the barrel shops. That's where persons collect their barrels. But it is a little bit more difficult to facilitate drive-ins for containers because you have to have your customs clearance and you have to have your examination and a number of things for that cargo to be delivered to you. So we do facilitate walk-ins at the shops where they do, at the sheds where they do delivery of LCL cargo and barrels.
Thank you. Member Al-Rari, you had a question?
Thank you very much. Thank you to Member Chaitan for asking the question that she did. I had a similar point, and there's one from that, but my original question, if I could put after, so we can just keep it in line with what has just been said. Bearing in mind that you have a couple of free hours between 7 to 10 from your analysis, and bearing in mind that your drive-ins have to have certain conditions precedent, documents in order, etc., is the population aware that they can still access, or I didn't get it clear, do you allow drive-ins if they have the conditions precedent satisfied?
Through the chair, yes, we do same-day appointment for pickup and delivery. This is domestic cargo through the gate, so we do have a facility where you can go in and make a same-day appointment.
Right, and you've advertised these things so that people would know, look, our spare hours are this. If you wish to come in without an appointment and you have the following, you may at your risk do those things, yes?
Through the chair, yes, we have advertised it, and because it's the hauliers, the main facility is used by the hauliers. The main reason for them not using the morning period is because they would normally want to go to the importer's facility and pick up a container before they come to our facility. So they are fully aware of it, Chair.
Is there any proposal to adjust your hours, bearing in mind the lack of utilization, so that your wages are in line with your actual work?
Through the chair, I'll take that one. So the hours of work within the Port Authority are within the collective agreement. But besides delivery, remember, we are just charging cargo, so work doesn't ever stop. The port operates 24 hours, 7 days a week. So although you may not be facilitating a cargo delivery, you may be receiving an export at the gate. So the operations are ongoing, and the gate operations run from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. every night.
Thank you very much. If I may return to the original question that I had in mind, it's to the Permanent Secretary. Good afternoon, everyone. Please, I was outside, didn't get to introduce myself, so I apologize. I'm Faris Al-Rawi, member of this committee. P.S. Thank you for the Ministry of Works and Transport Works and Infrastructure, forgive me, your written submission dated January 23, 2026. In answering Professor Prasad's questions a little while ago, you made reference to some high-level ambitions. And in your submission at page 3, you have referred us to the port having an approved strategic plan for the period 2024 to 2029. I'm assuming, of course, that that is still in place. And following that at page 4, under your modernization efforts to upgrade the port managed by the port, you are saying that you are guided by the revitalization blueprint. Could you please clarify for us the status of this revitalization blueprint? Is it one that has been accepted and does form part of the ministry's strategic plan? And is it one in respect of which there are particulars, because your modernization effort is guided by this blueprint? So have you engaged in the financial aspects as to how this will be funded? What are the achievable projects and what are the time frames for these aspects?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, if I may. The revitalization plan is currently in a tendering process, so I can't really divulge too much information on it. But if you look at the high level, there's an end game where we want to make Trinidad a global hub, right? We need to attract businesses to Trinidad. To get these businesses, we need to have advanced port facilities that could basically, support commercial activities as well as logistics arrangements, right?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that word. You said you couldn't provide us with details of the revitalization plan because it's tech ring. Is that what you said?
It's before tendering process right now.
Tendering, sorry. I thought you said tech ring. I thought it was a ring fence. So it's before tendering.
Yes.
So
February 5th is when the tendering process closed.
Sorry, so the revitalization plan, blueprint by which you're guided, you're saying that that is being tendered?
Yeah, that has been tendered. The bidding process will close on February 5th.
Could you please explain that for the benefit of the viewing public and listening public? What is being tendered? The blueprint is being tendered?
There are packages in the modernization effort of the Port of Port-of-Spain. Real estate land space is required, as you would see from what is on the ads that went out. You see some images of the port in expanded mode, right? These are basically entities that would, private-public partnership, that would basically be bidding for packages, right? So these entities would basically earmark areas that they want to operate, and that would guide the Port Authority in terms of how they need to configure their operations in the future state.
So as a matter of law then, and the Procurement Act, and the ministry's responsibilities to publish its procurement schedule and plan, are you saying that you have done that with respect to this?
This was approved by Cabinet, and it's basically like this: is once you have a public entity willing to bid, these are, as I say, it's open, right? You have packages, they go on the platform, they bid for the packages. If you have 5 or 6 entities that bid, then the entity that would evaluate would be UDCOT, and they would determine which package bring the best value for Trinidad. So UDCOT is the administrator of the...
So, sorry, that wasn't my question. My question was as a matter of law, which requires the ministry or the procuring entity to publish its procurement schedule and to have that with the OPR. I'm asking whether that has been done for this.
Yes, that was launched. That was it's advertised internationally.
Would you be able to provide us, by way of your further submissions, with a copy of the procurement schedule as it exists with the OPR? And if I may ask as well, are you saying that UDCOT is handling this procurement?
Yes, they are the central coordinators.
Would you be able to provide us, therefore, with the material that has allowed UDCOT to be the procuring entity for this revitalization blueprint? And if I may ask, therefore, insofar as your submission says that you're guided by, at page 4, the revitalization blueprint, how are you being guided by the blueprint if it is not yet in existence?
The blueprint is in existence. It's basically it's conceptual frameworks that when you're doing design, you start with a conceptual plan, right? So the blueprint is the conceptual plan of what we want the end state to be. And we frame the packages around that, and UDCOT basically be the administrator to basically manage the bidding process.
Therefore, could I please ask you in your further submissions to us to provide us with the blueprint, to provide us with the procurement arrangements that underwrite the blueprint, and to provide us with a time frame and schedule for the modalities of the blueprint? And if you could kindly also inform us how those are informing your submission at page 4 under question 3, Roman 2, where your modernization is being guided by that, if you'd provide us with the schedule as to how that's happening. And the last thing I would ask for, obviously I don't expect you to give me this information today, would simply be the financing behind it. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Sorry, Member Al-Rawi, I just wish to interject at this point to say, well, after that last question, we will move on because there are lots of other issues and questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay. That's why I said my last point.
Sure.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I will coordinate the information accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this stage, I'd like to acknowledge Member Marcel. You had a question.
Deeply grateful, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you, in the Port Authority's strategic plan, 2024 to 2029, one of the first strategic goals would be the achieving of financial sustainability by improving the revenue streams and managing operating costs. Based on the indication by Ms. Elbourne in relation to, or was it Ms. Batiste, in relation to the 65% capacity as well as an average of 400,000 thereabouts in handling in 2025. Is the Port Authorities, at least in the last fiscal year, is the Port Authorities operating system financially sustainable and or profitable?
Through the chair, so for 2025, the port would have realized an operational surplus of approximately $70 million. This is something that has not been achieved for a number of years, but it was done through a direct review of our operations, implementation of new tariffs, measures in terms of cost cutting. So that is where we're at currently at 2025.
One more question. In light of the increase in terms of the indications about the increase in the demand, whether through Guyana and Suriname and so on, that would have contributed to this major increase. In terms of the operational human resource that is required, let's say for 5 years ago, it may have been less. And from last year, and based on the trajectory, it seems to be continuing in an upward trend. Is your existing human resource sustainable to accommodate same, or is it that it's putting a strain on your human resource?
So in terms of the numbers, safety is always a priority. So there are minimum amount of gangs for operations. We are much lower than we were a number of years ago. In terms of the entire staff count, we're at like 1465. We would have been higher. So we've also streamlined the operations. But we are unable to make cuts. So example, a vessel is loading. You have lashers, you have different functions. So based on the operational requirement, the port is unable to cut the operations to say, okay, we're watching dollars here, let's reduce the man count, because safety is still the #1 priority. and the operations are undertaken with the basic manning levels required to undertake that operation.
Thank you. Member Chaitan Maraj.
All right, one question following on from Member Marcel and then on to my final question for this section. I don't think he was asking directly if there is enough manpower. Leading on from that, I would then ask if it is that you are saying you have less now than previously, then, or if the number you have now is not safe. Are there any?
No, the number now, through the chair, the number now is what we would determine to be more optimal to the operations.
Okay, great.
Yes.
And so from that, is there any step towards automation to help aid the pressure and the strain on manpower?
So based on the collective agreement, so there are 3 recognized majority unions at the Port Authority, the SWWTU, the EPA, and the SMA. So the collective agreements govern in terms of the operations, the manning levels. So any streamlining to reduce capacity in terms of numbers would be through a direct consultation process with the recognized majority union. So the collective agreement provides for the numbers for each area of operations. So it is not a unilateral move that the port can undertake to reduce that number.
Through the chair, that's not quite what I asked. I'm not leading towards decreasing the number of staff. I'm asking any efforts in increasing automation towards then increasing safety of work to the staff.
Through the chair, thank you for clarifying, member. Yes, there are efforts to increase automation because that is also tied to the overarching strategic objective of improving customer service delivery.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Elbourne. That satisfies you. Okay, I have a question, and it comes from previous recommendations made by the Joint Select Committee's inquiries, I think as far back as 2015. Now, in that committee's report, there were certain recommendations, one of which I believe I heard you mention, the NAVIS system. This was implemented, yes? And in that recommendation, the following things were suggested so that you would complete the vessel traffic management project, perform capital dredging to allow conventional ferries to maneuver properly, especially when berthing, address maintenance needs of the landing for conventional cargo ferries, procure a new ship-to-shore crane. And so how many of these have been implemented?
Through the chair, all of the above. We've undertaken the dredging, we've acquired 2 new ship-to-shore cranes, we've introduced the NAVIS container terminal management system, so all of it has been undertaken.
Okay, thank you. I also want to ask, in 2022, the strategic plan noted a reduction in the Port of Spain port's share of domestic container volumes to 52%, reduced from 57% in 2017. As of 2025, what is the Port of Spain port's share of the domestic container volumes?
Through the chair, at this time, our imports we are doing 71,000, which is roughly 50% of the import, and 17,000, which is 20% of the export volumes in Trinidad and Tobago.
And can you share, if you have this, what is the reason for the reduction in the domestic container shares?
Through the chair, our closest competitor, the Port of Point Lisas, they are predominantly the port that is doing most of the domestic cargo, reason being some of the top importers, for example, the Unicoma, the Standards, they have all relocated their warehouse to the central areas, and because of proximity, it is more appropriate for them to use that facility to do their loading and offloading of their cargo. And secondly, Based on the makeup of our port, we are predominantly servicing the transshipment line. So the niche carriers, the regional carriers are at the other facilities. So we have a different operation at both ports, and that port is more suited for the domestic markets, and we are more favorable for the transshipment cargo at this time.
Okay, and how has that impacted revenue?
In terms of the costing, the domestic cargo is priced higher than the transshipment cargo, and reason for that is globally transshipment cargo, because it's cargo that is transshipped so many times, it is significantly lower in terms of being able to compete on the regional market. However, our port is doing 100,000 more TEUs than the port of Point Lisa, so we are basically benefiting from economies of scale at this time, and our revenue would be in unison with that increased volume.
Okay, thank you for that. I would like to shift now to Member Prasad, who had some questions on the modernization of the port.
Thank you, Chairman. I still, as I indicated earlier, I still am not quite clear as to, why it is, you're modernizing. If you're saying you're operating well now, you're at good efficiency, etc., right? I mean, nobody modernizes for the sake of modernization, right? So, so maybe and you did indicate that there are various aspects of the port's operation. So, for instance, the digitalization of the information and scheduling is there, right? That's very clear and very, laudable that you're doing that. On that point, firstly, I remember way back I was in India, and a lot of the trucks come out at night in India because there's less traffic in the road. So the first part of the question, are you looking at expanding hours, maybe at night, since there's less traffic? And if you modernize in that sense that you reduce the workforce required to work at night, do you think that is going to help the efficiency of the port? If you want to become a transshipment point and a global hub, we operate 24 hours a day, as was indicated earlier. So any consideration has been given to operating 24 hours a day?
So, through the chair, at this time, our vessel operation, which is basically cargo that is being offloaded via the vessel, is 24 hours, 365 days a year. In terms of the gate operation, where we are operating 7 to 11, so that's where the private trucks will take cargo. At this time, 7% of that throughput is done between the hours of 6 to 9. So we have done several studies. We have met with the local business persons, and in order for us to be able to provide a facility, there has to be demand, and based on this study, a lot of these business places are not willing to open beyond that hour to be able to receive that cargo. So it is not beneficial at this time for us to go that direction of opening later than 11 o'clock.
Can I follow up, Madam Chair?
Certainly.
I've seen, containers parked in various streets at all hours of the night. So to suggest that they operate only in the day, I mean, something seems to be amiss there, because I know they park up the containers, the trucks deliver the containers or wait, and then the brokers come later on to check, etc., right? So it seems to me two things. One, if you have a 24 hours, ships coming 24 hours, you say, and you're not going to use that 24 hours to get rid of the cargo, then you're saying that you're going to have constraints with space, because it must be stored before you can move out. It's a simple process flow, right? And then, can you shed some light on the fact that,
You see containers. Through the chair, most likely the containers that are parked on the streets are empty containers. Containers that are full has to go to a facility, and also it has to be examined by the Customs and Excise Division. So that particular operation has to take place on the compound of an individual or a business place. As I said, you would see containers parking sideways, and those are empty containers. But in order to be able to, as I would have alluded to, when we look at the data, between the hours of 6 to 9, we are doing 7% of almost 300 container truck transaction a day. So right now, even in the evening time, the demand is is very insignificant right now based on the amount of containers that we do. So generally, our peak season for cargo passing through our gate would be between 10:30 and 6 o'clock, based on our current demand.
So then you said 93% flows between that period.
So we would see a very low uptake in the morning period, and as I would have alluded to earlier, this is because truckers would want to go to the facility to pick up an empty container, then to take a full container. It is profitable for them to be able to do a double move as opposed to a single move. So generally, we would see the majority of transaction at the gate being done between 10:30 and 6 in the afternoon.
Last question, Chair, that when you speak to hauliers outside, they complain of the traffic. So I find it a bit curious that they want to come during the day. And if you, I mean, I'm sure as you do, as we all do here, there's traffic in Trinidad. There's official statistics, there's more than 1 million vehicles on the road. There's traffic almost, during daytime until night, actually. So therefore, I'm a bit curious at why is it that, here in informal complaints, anecdotal information, no statistical information, that people, complain about the number of hours on the road, etc. It would be nice to get some clarity in that regard.
Through the Chair, if I can just share based on, we do have several engagements with the different stakeholders. Basically, in order for, while the hauliers and them are interested in picking up the container, because it's a cost for the manufacturers and them to pay overtime to open after 6. The main factor is getting the business community to be able to take that container during the evening hours.
I'll let the rest of this point, Madam Chair.
Certainly, I recognize you, Member Thomas.
Madam Chair, through you, I am listening to all the wonderful developments on the port and the potential to do very well. However, there was mention of a port city. And given what is happening on the port, and given the fact that we have mentioned that we are at full capacity now, where is the port in terms of working towards establishing the port city?
Member, I think that Mr. Dayan had touched on that previously.
Yeah, the port city is part of the revitalization plan.
On the issue of modernization, I want to ask, in your submission at page 21, you would have noted that these efforts are hindered by outdated collective bargaining agreements with the respective recognized majority unions, and that there's a need to revise or modernize the organizational structure, yeah? So what would you say are the critical skills gaps that exist, and how are these being addressed?
Through the Chair, in terms of our current operation and collective agreement, especially on the cargo side, it is not so much as the skills gap. Basically, it's the configuration of the operation. So because our collective agreement has last been updated since 1999, to be exact, it means that the practices within within that particular document does not support flexibility and modernization in terms of where the cargo and containerized operation has evolved. So, for example, it specifies, as the GM would say, it's very specific into the requirements of the manning letter, the type of categories of workers you can use in specific operation. So those are the areas when we talk about it not being effective enough to be able to support the modernization efforts.
May I ask another question? Is there a workforce transition plan to support any advancements in technology?
Through the Chair, so we've recently established a working committee to address the collective agreements within the Port Authority and to upgrade them. with the aim of introducing like a 5 and 7 shift system. So currently the port is one of the only ports in the region where we have institutionalized overtime on weekends. So there is a committee that has been established to work along with the union to introduce new collective agreements and new work practices into the operations.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to acknowledge Member Chaitan Miraj.
Okay, moving on to your performance. As in your submission, you compared to several regional counterparts. You noted that the Port Authority, this is on page 32, that the Port Authority has not embarked on the most recent modernization development trends for ports because existing infrastructure, equipment, and technology remain superior to many other regional ports, providing you with a competitive advantage in terms of your service operations and your operational facilities. Given that statement, in comparing Trinidad and Tobago's ports with other CARICOM countries, it's a fair comparison, but given that Trinidad and Tobago is the leading manufacturer in the Caribbean, is it a fair comparison?
Through the chair, Member, can you please repeat the question?
Is comparing Trinidad and Tobago's ports with other CARICOM countries a fair comparison, given that we are the leading manufacturer in the Caribbean region? My ask then is that you tabulated several other countries in the Caribbean, but if you've led out by saying that we are already leading in the Caribbean, why not then maybe consider comparisons with the other global leaders?
Through the chair, I believe that the question was specific to regional comparison. However, so when we look at Trinidad and Tobago, as you rightfully would have identified, we are leading, yes, in terms of the manufacturing aspect and also being a port that facilitates other Caribbean islands. So a lot of the Caribbean islands are receiving transshipment from us, which becomes their imports. So they are actually transiting their cargo through our port. So we generally are superior in that we are handling the larger vessels, the mainliner vessels that cannot go to these smaller islands, and we are also servicing the feeder vessel. A lot of these smaller islands, they don't have the draft to be able to handle the larger vessel, as well as in terms of superiority, in terms of equipment, we are well equipped, having right now on our books 5 STS crane, which a lot of the Caribbean islands generally use the mobile harbor crane, or they have a very small fleet of the STS cranes.
You have another question, Member?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so in comparing to Central American countries, then you listed, how are we comparing to them? So Costa Rica, Honduras, and then on from that, maybe for written submission, if putting on the spot now would be difficult. How do we compare then if we are going towards a port city in our revitalization project? How do we compare to the other world leaders? So Singapore, Rotterdam, all the other countries that are digitized and thriving and profitable.
Through the chair, in terms of the more global, international, what we call hub ports, Trinidad and Tobago is more or less not in the league, particularly because these ports are handling well over 2 million, 3 million TEUs. A lot of these ports, the model is different. So a lot of the ports, the bigger ports, the transshipment hub, even in the region, when you look at Jamaica, Caucedo, Cartagena, these are all ports that are operated by private terminal operators, and it means that they have a higher capital investment into their facilities. So while Trinidad and Tobago has the superiority in terms of the region, when it comes to our capital investment that is required, we are not benchmarking with these larger ports, because a lot of these ports are funded by private investors that have the capital, and our port is predominantly funded through PSIP, so most of our funding comes through PSIP for our equipment, and we are competing with all the other relevant national agency, as well as when you look at our rates, for example, right now to clear a barrel at the barrel shop costs $50 TT, compared to private warehouse in Trinidad and Tobago that charge $500. So we are still offering a subsidized public good to the nation of Trinidad and Tobago as well.
Thank you for that explanation. At this, do you have another question, member?
All right, moving on from the efficiency and the profitability, then moving on towards the digitization aspect of it, you had stated that the equipment division is the division that is responsible for acquisition, this is page 33, sorry, for acquisition, preventative maintenance, service, inspection, and repairs of the cranes and equipment. And the division uses the Dynastar 2000 computerized maintenance management system, that's CMMS, to effectively schedule, track, and manage the maintenance of cranes and equipment. How well does the Dynastar CMS integrate into border asset modernization and replacement planning?
Through the chair, we'll direct that to the equipment manager.
Okay, so the Dynastar maintenance management system is a fairly good system that we have been using for almost about 15 years. Now the system, we input all the data from the cranes and other equipment into the system. And that generates all the work orders, all the maintenance schedules, and also monitor our unscheduled repairs, our unplanned work.
Through your chair, following on, you said 15 years now. Is this a program that can be seen to move into the future with the plans coming up for Port City, etc.?
Yes, the system, we have upgrades, periodic upgrades on it, but compared to other systems like Maximo, etc., it's a bit cheaper in terms of cost, but we have ongoing upgrades of the system.
Do you have any further questions, member, on this? No? Okay. I'd like to invite member Marcel. I believe he had some questions on the operational performance.
In terms of the operational performance, the audits, in your submissions, you stated that the audits from 2019 to 2021 were undertaken in a 3-year consecutive audit, which was finalized in the second week of 2026. The Port Authority also indicated that you intend to propose to undertake the audits from 2022 to 2024 in another consecutive 3-year audit cycle to be completed within the next 9 to 12 months. What are the reasons for the delay in completing these audits in a timely manner?
The EMFA will answer accordingly.
Good afternoon, thank you. Through the chair, the audits were a bit backlogged as at 2021 in that financial year, and that is why at that stage we decided to undergo a 3-year audit in one consecutive run. It's something that was never envisioned before, but in order to get us as up to date as possible, we did undertake 19, 2020, 2021. So we finalized on that in this current month, so that will be sent out for adoption within this week into next week. And further, to keep it up to date, because 2021 is still at a backdated position, we would continue in that same vein and undertake 2022 to 2024 in a 3-year consecutive audit again, which usually, 1-year audit usually takes 9 months or so. But we had intended, based on this first go at the 3-year consecutive, to get the next 3 years done within a 1-year period. And right after that, we would have the 2025 and 2026. So Port Authority would be up to date within the upcoming year or two.
Very grateful. Chair, through you, did the COVID-19 pandemic have any, was it a contributing factor in terms of the delay, in terms of that time period?
It did take an impact on us because the audit firms were not considered essential services, and they had to have their staff reassigned, trying to work everybody now trying to use electronic transmissions to get the audits done, which is something new, of course, that you have to adapt to. So it did, in fact, delay that audit that we were completing within the 2020 to 2022 period. And that's why right after we attempted to do this 3-year to bring it up to date.
Deeply grateful. The audits were done internally or externally?
No, it's an external audit.
Which auditing firm conducted the last, the 2019 to 2021?
BDO.
What, beg your pardon?
BDO.
The 2022 to 2024 period that is going to be going to take next, or be audited next. Is it the same audit firm that is going to audit, or is it that is going out for tender?
It is going out for tender.
When is it expected to be out for tender?
It's going to be reviewed by our board first and approved to go out to tender, and once we have the approval, it will be issued for tender.
Is it in your procurement schedule
It
for this
is.
fiscal?
Yes, it is.
Deeply grateful.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, in relation to, I just want to move on unless any members have any questions on this point.
That's fine.
Yeah? All right. In relation to your submission, you indicated the main operational metrics, KPIs used to measure the port performance, including the crane move per hour, berth move per hour, vessel weighting, etc. Do the listed KPIs provide a balanced view of operational performance?
Through the chair, those are the international benchmark standards upon which a port is judged. So those KPIs that we included, that is the benchmark for a port, any standard port. And that is not just regional, it's international.
Yeah. Ms. Elbourne, you indicated earlier that, or Ms. Batiste, I can't recall it, that in relation to, you have the system in terms of monitoring productivity up to an hourly basis. Can you indicate in terms of why that may be able to be monitored in terms of how many cranes are moved, in terms of the operational aspect? How do you monitor productivity in terms of your human resource?
Through the chair, so based on the configuration of the operation, we have different levels of supervision. So for example, particularly on our vessel operation, we will have a supervisor assigned, so they are responsible for ensuring that the vessel is unlashed, all the gears are correctly unlashed. We also have a person that is named a key officer, which manage the entire operation in terms of being able to discharge, to load, ensure that the plans are being undertaken. And overall, we have a superintendent that is there to supervise all the operations that is taking place, whether vessel as well as landside and yardside. So we have various levels of supervision, and they would submit reports every 4 hours. They would submit a report, and these reports are viewed directly by the managers via email.
In terms of you operate the port through here, the port operates in terms of with different stakeholders, not only the port authority. You have customs, I think that NITCO is even sharing the space and so on. Does, it may or may not, how does that impact your productivity, whether you believe that, let's say, for example, customs in terms of some process, or NITCO in terms of some process, how does it affect, whether positively or otherwise,
Through the
your
chair,
operations?
it has the potential to impact the port's operation significantly. So for instance, the determination on when you get your cargo, the examination of that cargo, that is done by customs. Medicine is required by Ministry of Health. So there are a number of stakeholders that greatly impact the port operations that are external to the port environment, but it does filter down to us. That is a very good question, because we do not operate in isolation. The efficiency of the port is also dependent on the key strategic partners and agencies that are needed to also function to get us where we need to be. So thank you.
Yeah. So, because I want to ask concerning the customer engagement and satisfaction indicators, And that too, because an average customer going to collect a barrel and have to wait 2 hours for a custom officer, let's say, to check their barrel, doesn't really reflect well in terms of the organization, the person know that they come to the port to collect. So how you're able in your customer engagement and your satisfaction indicators to differentiate in terms of that impact?
So we do capture delays in terms of customer service. So we have port delays, vessel delays, state agency delays. So we do capture the various categories of data in terms of what agency and at what point has caused a delay in this customer getting their good. So that helps us as well to have direct stakeholder engagement to resolve the issues. So one of the critical issues we had was that customs was only collecting cash. So as of November last year, we were able to work along with the Ministry of Finance and Customs so that they are now doing transactions through links and debit and credit. And that was one of the key holdbacks at the port, because people will walk with their card, and when they get there, they will say, oh, we're accepting cash only. So you have to leave and come back. So part of us dealing with the other state agency delays is to engage them to have a resolution to it.
Yeah. Madam Chair, through you, I'm going to move to
yes, sure,
point,
that's fine.
unless any other members have a question on that point. Yeah?
Proceed, member.
In terms of productivity, and you mentioned also that your productivity depends a bit on the stakeholders, when they come, when they don't come, right? I want to ask the question, was any sort of work study ever done on the operations report? A work study is a technical term when we, at different times, we come and look at people, what they do. So if we come, today at 10 o'clock and we see people standing up in a particular place, we come back tomorrow at 11 and see the same thing again. We can determine, the productivity of people. So an external work study analysis and workflow, was that ever done?
Through the chair, we do internal time motion studies, and it examines at the level of clearance all the input by the government agencies and how long your documentation or you may have stayed at that point. So that is done internally.
Can I take it through the chair that you have like industrial engineers or management experts internally that analyzes these sort of things?
Yes, that's correct.
But don't you think that to get an external, how you have an external audit for finance, ensure that it is, I use the word advisedly and it comes above board, right? That to get an external party to do these time studies, right?
Through the chair, I do agree with you, and we could take up that recommendation and implement it.
And that's why I'll end with the last point in this regard, Chair, is that, I was at UTT previously to here, right? And we have been trying to work, I think, generally speaking, let me not talk about UTT, but universities right here and the colleges, to improve, we need to have a problem, we need to resolve the problem of the universities and the students that have been involved in the state institution in the first instance, right? So I want to ask, is there any move, right, on the part of the port to engage, the universities? So for instance, like you talk about JSC reductions, you must have a baseline. This has been done, and the universities do that. So what I'm saying, I think the general point is that if we want to improve efficiency, etc., I think across the board, I'm not isolating or focusing on the port, but we need to get the universities a little more involved. Is there any movement in that regard?
Through the chair, thank you for asking that. We actually did take a paper to our board last month to create that partnership with the university. So we find that in areas of research for the port operations, that these would be the ideal persons to do so. So that is actually at the level of our board for consideration.
I compliment you on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Prasad. Member Marcel, you had additional questions, okay.
Deeply grateful, please, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you, in relation to the submissions by the Port Authority, in terms of the performance indicators from 2020 to 2025, we have seen and indicated by Ms. Elbourne earlier that there has been a significant turnaround in terms of the vessel turnaround time, increasing in 2025 to 24 hours, and similarly, the average terminal yard utilization increased to 81% in 2025. Based on your analysis, what were the main factors and/or conditions that contributed to the decline in the operational performance prior to the 2025?
Through the chair, so to look at the average vessel turnaround time. Now, when you have a vessel awaiting berth at the port at Anchorage, there are various factors that go into berthing a vessel. So generally, what we see when we look at our data, to at least 88% of the delays are attributed to agents. What are those agent delays? So those would be awaiting load plans, awaiting documentation. Sometimes the vessel would arrive and it would await connecting cargo. So generally, in terms of our vessel turnaround time, 88% based on our data that we are monitoring are attributed to the agents, the carriers of the vessel themselves. In terms of the other 12%, we are experiencing congestion in terms of being able to, particularly, as I would have mentioned earlier, because we are handling the larger vessel and the smaller feeder vessel, which is more inefficient, we are experiencing congestion due to the configuration of these vessels. So you find that one of these vessels sometimes they average around 270 containers. However, when a vessel like that comes to our port and we have challenge with opening the hatch covers because there may be some mechanical problems, because these are very dated vessels, we can't see our waiting time increase. So generally, because we are handling a large percent of these feeder vessels that are very dated, we are actually seeing continuous increase in terms of the congestion at our berth when it comes to that 12%, but overall 88% is attributed to the agents themselves.
Through you, Chair, in light of that indication, where the vast majority really relates to the agents and perhaps inexperience, perhaps lack of resources, that kind of thing. What measures does the Port Authority, because at the end of the day, it still affects your productivity, although albeit external circumstances. What sort of measures do you intend to implement, whether it's sensitization, whether it's training, whether it is public education in terms of for the agents, whether it's training, what sort of measures do you think that you can put in place to overcome these challenges and to reduce those delays?
Through the chair, thank you for that question. We have been monitoring the data and we have in fact implemented several mechanisms. So for one, in terms of public awareness, on our website, we have process flows. So you can go on our website and you can see how to clear apparel, how to ship your container. So in terms of the process and what is required, the documentation, we have outlined those processes on our website. Secondly, we are also using social media. So we are doing a lot of videos, a lot of graphic designs and sharing this with the public. So the public, the shipping lines, the brokers, because the honorable member is right that what we find is that a lot of persons are unaware of the requirements that are necessary. So you find you would have some delay because of that lack of awareness. So we are now developing a lot of infographics to show exactly the flow of the processes, sharing these, as I said, via social media. We are sharing this on WhatsApp. Secondly, we are having consultations. So this week, tomorrow to be exact, we're going to be meeting with our second top shipping line, and those discussions are going to be around how can they improve their operations, because right now we do have fees that are charged in our tariff for late documentation, but it's not so significant that it's creating an effect. So we are taking a consultative approach first, but we have also recently implemented a structure where we are going to be enforcing some higher penalties for some of these delays that are impacting our operation.
In terms of the penalties that you intend to review, in terms of the legal framework notice, and so on, in terms of increasing those fines, because that perhaps may be a significant deterrent to ensure that we reduce the delay. Does the Port Authority has the unlimited discretion to increase those fines, or is it subject to parliamentary oversight?
Through the chair, the port does not have discretion to unilaterally adjust its tariff rates. So we would make a recommendation to our ministry, and it would be the matter of a draft cabinet note subsequently for consideration.
Thank you. Member Mohit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question in terms of stakeholder engagement and discussions. When last the port had held discussions with customs in terms of improving the operations and the efficiency of the port itself?
Through the chair, so we have established an oversight committee and their Ministry of Finance, and we do have monthly meetings with customs in terms of improving not just their operations, but in terms of a joint collaboration to better deliver on their end.
And one more question, Madam Chair. A question just came in from a member of the public in terms of delays in transshipment of containers to Guyana. Are there delays with that?
Through the chair, thank you for that question. So we did check the data because we expected it. We did have some challenges in 2024 with containers going to Guyana and Suriname, but I can expressively state that at this time we have 171 containers on our facility that is currently being loaded on a vessel for Guyana at this time.
Okay, thank you. Member Marcel, there's a question you have? Okay.
Deeply grateful, Madam Chair. Two quick questions on this point. In relation to your submissions, you indicated an average of 65% of the international benchmark for vessel productivity is what you're operating at. But at page 39 of the report, you went on further to see that the standardized performance data is limited, that customer feedback suggests that the port faces efficiency challenge compared to regional counterparts. And in light of same, if you are saying that these are some of the shortcomings in terms of the data that you have received, how reliable is the claim that you are operating or achieving the 65% international benchmark, given that you have limited regional data?
Truly, Chair. So the answer to that question speaks directly to the request in terms of regional or international port. So based on the 65%, based on studies and international benchmark, for an STS crane, which is a ship-to-shore crane, the required moves for port supposed to perform is 25 moves per hour. So that's based on the international benchmark. However, in terms of the regional benchmark, because the data is not available, we cannot do a comparison to see where we are in terms of regional ports at this time.
So in terms of you're saying that the international benchmark, the 75% and over is really at the average in terms of the international benchmark.
25 moves per hour.
25 moves per hour. What systems and or resources are being implemented within this fiscal and going forward to get the ports to achieve those higher international benchmarks?
So, through the chair, one of the things, as I would have mentioned, is that we are now looking at segregating the feeder vessels from the mainliner, because what we realize is that we are performing very well on the mainliner. So that would be a amalgamate of figures when you do your average and you are able to see what is your performance. So what we are doing now, we are looking at the more efficient vessel performance separately out of the non-cellular feeder vessels. So that will give us an indication, because the smaller vessels are actually pulling down our figures. So when we look at the more efficient vessels, we are doing average between 16 to 19. On the less efficient vessels, we are around 11, 12. So when that figure is amalgamated, it pulls down the figure. So that's one. Secondly, in order for us to increase our productivity at this time, we need space, because one of the main strategies that ports use is to what we call dumping of cargo. So when a container is loaded off a vessel, it must not wait for a truck. And in our situation, because we don't have the space, our containers are being loaded on ITV tractor trucks. So there is some waiting time for those tractor trucks to make that cycle. So one of the things that we are looking at right now, we have some cargo in a particular area that we are going to look to clear out and see if we can create a buffer space so that we can increase the cycle time for the crane in terms of being able to discharge off the crane either on a truck or onto the quayside immediately. So that would increase our performance significantly.
Deeply grateful. Madam Chair, I'd like to move to a question on industrial relations and wage negotiations through you, Madam Chair.
Sure, proceed.
Deeply grateful. At page 42 of your submissions, you indicated that the updated workers' collective agreement, which has still not been fully implemented due to outstanding wages. Can you give this committee an indication as to what is the quantum in terms of the outstanding wages to be implemented?
Through the chair, the quantum will be determined by the offer on the table. So in terms of the percentages, it will be based on that. But I'd just like to acknowledge that we do have 3 recognized majority unions. So we would have settled 2 in 2025, and that was in the vicinity of $56 million.
What percentage in terms of 5%? In terms of the increase?
It varied by the EPA and the SMA. So one averaged about 14%, and the other was for one period, and it was for 4%.
All right. And you said you negotiated and settled these two with these two
in
majority
2025.
in 2025. Apart from the settlement, does the settlement include actual payment that you have already made the payment within the
Yes,
within
the
the
port
last
was
fiscal?
able to effect payment within the fiscal. That's correct.
Yeah. In terms of the last remaining majority union, how many workers are expected to be affected by the last remaining union that has not been settled?
Through the chair, the majority of workers, we're looking at approximately over 90%. But I did mention earlier, we have established a committee who would be working along with the union to have that addressed. It is subject to negotiations at this time, but the port is committed, and I take the opportunity to ensure my employees, the management is committed to resolving it as well.
Is it the intention of of your authority to attempt in this fiscal year to treat with and settle and pay this negotiated wages for the 90% of the Port Authority employees?
So through the chair, PAT does not get recurrent revenue in terms of subvention funding. So we do meet wages and salaries, but the back pay element is met by the government. So that determination will, in terms of the payment and the tranches, will be determined at another level.
Deeply grateful. In light of the partial implementation, 10% thereabouts, and outstanding 90% of the implementation of the collective agreement, how has that affected, if at all, the human resource performance in the authority?
So I know, through the chair, our employees do have expectations, but we have very committed employees at the Port Authority, and despite their outstanding negotiations, we have been able to meet our deliverables, and the workers are eagerly anticipating. However, they have not withheld their labor. We did have instances of strike action, but for the past few months, within the last year, we've had no action taken, and the workers have been attending to their duties.
So do you say that there's any low worker morale or motivation, even without the strike? Of course, workers, being excited and eager to get their back pay. Any indication in terms of your internal human resource oversight to indicate whether there is in fact low worker morale or motivation in the authority?
Through the chair, I think money motivates, and in the absence of same, there tends to be a little bit of a hit on the morale. But for the most part, we do have active engagement with the workers, and there's dialogue that is taking place to have a resolution.
And one last question. Who is the majority, the 90%, who is the majority union of that?
The 90-something% falls within the Seamen and Waterfront Workers' Trade Union.
I'm deeply grateful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member Marcel. We have a question from Member Benjamin.
Chair, through you, and for the sake of the members of this committee and those looking on, could you indicate when was the last strike action? I know you indicated there was none for the last year. If you could give us that time period.
December 2024 was, through the chair, December 2024 was the last action.
Thank you. Member Mohit, did you have any questions that you wish to ask?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Chair. Madam Chair, I've listened today in terms of the Global Hub, the revitalization project, policies to deal with the empty containers, regular meetings being held with Customs and Ministry of Finance, the debit system, and the innovative ways to get your audit, which was outstanding for so many years. It is quite commendable, I must say, the initiatives being undertaken by you all. But one of the things which based on your submission, I think is lacking is your crisis management. Now, I note in the submission that you said you do not currently operate under a single standalone enterprise-wide crisis management policy. What we would like to know in this committee today is how do you ensure consistency and coordination without a single enterprise-wide crisis management policy? Because I would believe that I looked at the submission and investigation and review is not quite sufficient. So, how do you ensure that consistency and coordination?
Thank you, through the chair. So although there isn't one governing policy, the port falls under various pieces of regulations. In terms of the operations, especially in terms of the vessel, the 3 port facilities fall under what you call the ISPS code. So the emergency response plans, although it is not one cohesive document, the operations are fully covered and we ensure collaboration based on the area of the crisis at the time, and we ensure that the relevant regulation that is to be applied for that area is what is initiated. So if I could expand further. So for the vessels, for example, the vessels fall under various codes, and so we would have different emergency response plans for the vessels. The operations, the cargo operations would have a different emergency response plan. So there isn't one cohesive plan, but the organization operations are adequately addressed.
Sure. Madam Chair, given that you are before this committee and given the operations of your organization or the authority, as we may say, anything that is operating 24 hours, 365 days a year is deemed something essential, as an essential service. Despite the fact that you are operating under different regulations, I think it is a useful suggestion that you incorporate all of them and you have a crisis management policy that you can look to because of the fact that crisis response effectiveness is also crucial, which brings us to my next question. How is crisis response effectiveness really measured if you have no single policy incorporating all your regulations, which you can look back to?
So there isn't one single policy, but we do have a governing framework under which we will operate under for an emergency at the port, if it means increasing the threat level. So it isn't an actual policy document, but there is a guideline under which we would operate. But I do take your recommendation, and I thank you for it.
So, Member Benjamin, I believe you also had some questions on crisis management.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, Chair. Chair, given what my colleague, the other member, just highlighted, and what your submissions indicated, and this is at page 48, how is training effectiveness evaluated?
Through Through the chair, training, so at the end of each training program, we do one-on-one performance assessments. We have introduced testing after training to ensure that employees have understand the modules. And we do as well a survey, so you go back into your operational area and there's a feedback survey from that training program, and that's how we monitor the effectiveness of it. You will see the actual effectiveness of it during an actual drill. So the vessels, for example, the cargo vessel will do a weekly drill, so that is how we determine the efficiency of the training.
Chair, through you, if you permit me. Chair, employees was referenced based on the last answer, but with regards to crisis management and emergency preparedness, are contractors and third parties included in this preparedness measure?
Yes, we do. And I would just like to add, in terms of anyone accessing the port facility, you are required to undergo safety training. There's an online assessment, and there's a minimum graded percentage that you're required to pass. So anyone accessing the facility at all has to undergo the ports training module.
Chair, given the environment, through you, Chair, if you allow me, given the environment that is the port, and everyone in this committee and you yourself would admit that this is a high-risk environment, could you tell me what tracking system for corrective and preventative actions arising out of crisis, what system exists?
Thank you. Through the chair. So the first course of action is predicting that something will happen. So we do what you call predictability testing. So let's say for the cargo operations, we would have a drill where we simulate a spill. That simulation would be a real-life demonstration of what happens and how the employees are expected to respond. We do drills in terms of the vessels. We do an evacuation of the vessel. So there's an emergency on board. We need to evacuate 500, 600 persons. So that is how we would tackle that area. But we do a lot of predictive testing. What is the probability of this happening? And that is what will guide us. So we know for sure a cargo vessel may have a spill. What course of action would we immediately kick in when that happens?
Having reviewed your submissions at page 50, now certain things was highlighted with regards to putting measures in place for weather and marine monitoring, safety measures, and different incidents and security monitoring and operational monitoring. But for the members of this committee, how resilient monitoring and communication systems for power outages and cyber attacks and system failures, given, as my colleagues, members of this committee, rightfully pointed out, the importance of the port?
I'm sorry, through the chair. So we do have our own transformer system in terms of regulating the electricity. And you would have asked about the other area.
Right.
Sorry.
So with regards to cyber attacks, yes.
So fortunately, we've not been the victim of a cyber attack, but we did undertake an audit in 2025 to test our system. And as a result of that, I'll be honest with you, they basically said you need to do a lot of investment to protect your system, and we've started that. So we started with the external backup system. We've started, we actually have a risk and engaged a provider to do a risk of the system. So they would come in and see where a threat exists and how easy it is to penetrate the system. So that is ongoing at this time.
Chair, and if you'll permit me one more question. And I would like to take you back to employee and employee safety, given the high-risk environment. Could you, for the sake of members of this committee, tell us how many health and safety issues you treat with on probably a yearly basis, and if you have any ongoing matters in the court or internal issues with regards to health and safety personal injury cases.
Thank you. Through the chair. So I would premise this answer by saying port business is dangerous business. And our employees are at risk for height, lifting of cargo. So we do have health and safety issues, and we have a couple matters before the industrial court. But that being said, I don't want to say it is part of the environment or it is to be expected, but we do put the measures in place to prevent that, because safety is always the #1 priority. But the very nature of our operations does bring a higher level of risk to it than other operations that another state entity may have.
Chair, through you again, while I appreciate your answer, I did not get a number, and I would really appreciate that, and for the sake of those listening and the members of this community.
Okay,
and I would
thanks.
like to further personalize my request. Given that my dad was injured in such a high-risk environment, I know what it is for an employee to be injured, and the employers do not take the relevant steps or measures, even as simple with regards to the workmen compensation. So given the high-risk environment, I would like to know the status of such cases, and if you don't have the information, feel free to provide it in writing.
And sorry, if I may intervene, there's just one question to add onto that. As you've identified, it's high risk. Has the trend been going up, or has it been decreasing in terms of the number of these incidents?
No, we've generally been able to reduce the number of incidents and accidents, but I will provide a written submission on the actual numbers, member, and that will be forthcoming.
Yes, Member Marcel.
Deeply grateful, please, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you. In relation to Member Benjamin, as well as the chair, Madam Chair's question, we have had comparators in terms of the productivity, in terms of the profitability with the Port Authority and different regions. Has there been any comparative study in relation to what is in terms of the risk and the actual incidents at the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago as compared to other international ports, in terms of, let's say, in the port of some other country, that there is 2 incidents per day based on the flow, 2 incidents per year, for example. But in Trinidad and Tobago, we have 5, for example, to compare. Is there any comparative data to guide us in terms of knowing whether we have been doing the Port Authority have been doing due diligence and have been, even while reducing the amount of incident, is still within a range that is acceptable, basically across the international standards?
Through the chair, no, I'm not aware of the regional data, but I will say we do partner with the regional ports for port training and safety disaster preparedness. That is an ongoing collaboration. But I can request the data if you so.
I think that it would be, for the sake of the committee and the listening, and especially for the employees, that we would need to get that information as to judge it, because we are simply judging it based on what would have happened last year, and that trend, as opposed to having it across the board, where we can measure some level of success. Thank you very kindly, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member Marcel. Now, we've heard quite a bit from the Port Authority, and we thank you for your contributions. At this stage, I would like to shift some questions over to the Line Ministry, and being the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure. And to start, I would like to refer to your submissions, I believe at page 2, where you said that there was an establishment of a high-level steering committee as part of oversight mechanisms and performance monitoring. Is this committee, so I have 3 questions. Is the committee properly constituted? If no, what are the reasons for the delay? How many meetings were held in 2025? And what were some of the key decisions coming out of that meeting, those meetings?
Through you, Madam Chair. This meeting is a meeting that was convened by the Minister of Works and Infrastructure. It's a monthly meeting. It's basically to improve port efficiency. The Minister of Finance is also there, the Comptroller of Customs, Excise, Director of Maritime Services, myself, all the various subunits within the Port Authority there. So it's basically to look at the issues and work out solutions for solving these problems.
Sorry, I wanted to ask how many meetings you said you had in 2025?
I would have joined in the ministry in August there. Well, May, transition into August into that ministry, and I would have, there have been monthly meetings, frequent meetings, and site tours. So we did a site tour to make sure that the scanning system that scans the truck are working. We did it with customs, and we check for the efficiency and make sure these things are working, very importantly. Right now, ministry is looking at the drainage system under the port. That is, well, the gates, the exit point for the drainage systems is basically corroded away. And we're looking to mitigate the flooding in Port of Spain by doing a study to make sure that whether we need to put in pumping systems and their water retention dam ponds. So there are studies we need to be doing. We're looking at the surface of the port because the aquifer that comes from the hills, the mountains, it flows through Port of Spain, and you would see on the street of Richmond, this water is being, discharged in the street, right? As well as the ingress of the water from the seaside. So we're looking at managing the subsurface at the port to make sure that they're fixed, it don't get soft, basically. It means integrity, and it can handle the loading capacity. So we have some engineering inputs that the ministry is looking at, civil engineering, to solve some of these port problems.
Okay, thank you. I recall member Professor Prasad did have some questions on some of the projects undertaken.
Thank you, Chairman. You said that you're going to get PSIP funding for a variety of specified equipment acquisition, right? Whilst I don't require a detailed list, or I'm asking for a detailed list, can you highlight some of the equipment you're going to acquire and in which areas, because you have various areas of operation, which areas are going to impact on, and if you could give an indication of how much you're looking at the impact.
Okay, the ministry, one of the major shortcomings in a port, right? All ports have fuel supply system, bunkering systems, right? Based on the energy laws, the monopoly resides with these companies, NP, the problem is the ports don't have the bunkering system. It's a lost opportunity for revenue. So like, let's say NPs are across there with the depot, all you need is the pipeline to go across to allow the fuel to fuel the vessels, right? So we're looking at projects that could enhance the port and modernize it, right? It would give the port additional revenue, okay? So that's one, the aspect of the dredging. We put a lot of money to dredge the port, which was funded through PSIP. Some companies just get a free ride, like maritime preservation. They have a slipway there. They do the important revenue, but they don't really contribute to the dredging, So there are things we want to look at into the model so that we could do cost sharing, improve the operations, because the port spans from Sealots all the way to Invaders Bay, right? And we're looking, even the fisheries section of the port, Port of Spain, it's for trawler operation. That is, by National Fisheries there, that is an area for improvement, because we have a lot of derelict vessels across there, we need to move it out. I personally would have dealt with spills from the Sealots area there. That would have impacted the Port of Spain. I would have dealt with spills from the TNTEC tank, the bunker seat that would enter the drains and impacted Port of Spain. And in terms of the continuous response plan, there's an oil spill plan that basically would safeguard ships from getting dirty with these heavy fuel, right? So the whole asset integrity of every infrastructure along the port the real estate management is something we need to look at. A big area of deficiency is that Port Authority is supposed to be a regulator of all ports in Trinidad and Tobago. Oil and gas company, when they set up Operation Trinidad, they're entitled to have ports, but the Port Authority is not regulating them, so that they could earn revenue from that. So we want to look at amending the laws to empower the Port Authority to have the capacity to regulate all ports and earn income. So they have the technical capacity, but we just have ports that are unregulated. We have well, it's ports and harbors together, right? The harbor is basically water, and the port is the land, right? So we have a lot of areas, a lot of harbors that the port's supposed to be managing Port Authority through the harbor master. So you have a lot of vessels that come in, dropping anchors, damaging the environment, the reefs and whatever, and whether they're paying the fees, anchorage fees. These are lost opportunities that we're trying to capture.
Through you, Chairman, just want to quick follow-up questions. The bunker, you're looking at mainly diesel?
Marine grade diesel motor oil, ultra low sulfur diesel. You have different, low sulfur diesel.
Because I know zero emissions shipping, green shipping is a big thing now, right?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of projects in that. Are you considering the option of methanol because a lot of the new ships are using methanol. Are you considering that, or is that an option? Because I know it's been mentioned before. Yeah.
Well, I'll let Director of Maritime Services answer that.
Thank you, Member. The answer is yes. All right. It is. Sorry, the answer to the looking at different ways of green fuel. The answer is yes. Those are projects in the inception stages. Yes, there is a lot of talk about it in the media before, but it is progressing as to how we can. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we would have done 2 ships last year. I think Pullman would have done some examples. So that project is on the way and progressing. But you'll understand that methanol is not that easy to pump from one way to the next. So, but I think we are making headway, and soon we would be a hub for methanol bunking.
Okay. The other thing, through you, Chairman, is that in terms of the green shipping, so other than the fuel, right? I mean, ships coming in. Do you have responsibility, authority over, the emissions from ships as they come into the area? And if so, are you doing anything to measure the emissions from the ships?
Okay. So the Caribbean is not an emission control area in accordance with the IMO. So, like in some ports in California and so on, they do measure the emissions. But we are looking at it. We have through MTCC, which at UTT, that is one of the projects they're looking at.
I see. So, are you going to make recommendations that that ships conform? Because we are part of this climate change, we signatory, and therefore, I think in terms of you need to get across the country, the various sectors, the baseline emissions. What's the status on that? If at all you all are going to look at that.
Well, it's through the IMO that basically a lot of the ships, because if you enter Europe and the US, you need to ensure that you're in compliance, right? So there's a net zero agenda on the IMO where ships have to do the conversion. A lot of ships have spent motor oil, black diesel, bunker C, all these high emission, sulfur emissions. We want to go more towards more lighter fuel that basically support the environment. But it's not us who is driving it. It's these first world nations, because the ships come to Trinidad and then it might stop offload cargo and then go to these other destinations. and they're the ones who basically drive the conversion. But we want to capitalize on that because Trinidad, being outside the hurricane belt, low risk in terms of hurricanes, wherever we're primed for dry docking, right? And when we capture the market by creating a dry docking facility, ships that come to Trinidad, and we do the conversions of these vessels to improve their compliance towards climate change.
I see. Thank you. Fine. Yeah.
Thank you, Member. You mentioned the issue regarding the challenges with the regulatory framework. Would you mind sharing what are some of those risks that are associated with these challenges?
Okay, okay. Let's say the Port Authority as a regulator. Well, the government, we at the ministry, our objective is to create a stabilized society, right? One thing we do is to mitigate the state exposure to risks, liabilities. A lot of operators, they generate a lot of liabilities, which the state have to write off, right? As the Port Authority being a regulator, they manage the liabilities. So there was as I mentioned, vessels, derelict vessels was being imported into Trinidad. They're dropped all over the place. Salvage inside the Port of Spain at the sealouts end, scrapping for the steel. I was there doing the investigation. The operator who was doing salvaging was literally taking the buckets of bunker C fuel and throwing it overboard into the sealouts area. Spent $5 million to clean up that. So what I'm saying is, as a regulator for the port, vessels that coming in, we have a lot of old ships, right? They would basically have oversight of where the ships are going, where they're anchoring, right? Manage the risk. Because if you have a vessel that comes in and catches fire in the channel, right, it blocks, it blocks the port operation, right? So through the harbor master, through the control. So if you have a chief harbor master with the Port Authority, and every other port has a harbor master, through central command, you'll be able to do crisis management, better crisis management, right? So we have situations where in the offshore where I experience barges bringing heavy pipeline, break away from the tugboat, drifting, it collided with the BP, SBM. We had cases of this same barge drifting to Venezuela, could collide with something in Venezuela, right? So by the Port Authority managing and working with the Maritime Services and Coast Guard, we'd have better control in terms of mitigating risks. So a big aspect of Port Authority being the core regulator is that they would basically mitigate the state exposure to liabilities.
I also want to ask, based on your submission at page 10, you mentioned that they're unauthorized ports. What did you mean by that? And what are some of the examples?
Okay. There's a case in Carinage where an operator working in the oil and gas sector decided to just dump material, expand the dumping, and created a port facility, right? That matter went to Commission of State Land. They haven't ruled because it's not legal, right? You just can't put up a port facility because you affect the current flow. You affect silt station, you're blocking the channels for drainage, you have flooding because of that, right? So there has to be studies. You just don't put up a port facility, right? So the oil and gas operators have historically, through the Petroleum Act, been allowed to set up their ports by part of the operation, like Heritage Port, former Trinma, Galluta. Then you have these ports that Claxon Bay, all these areas that evolve into port facilities, right? You have like Shark Term is one of them. Shark Term was really when we were bringing in the North Coast project, NCMA. It was a pipe laydown yard, okay? It evolved to an offshore site for building platforms, the top side, the bottom side. Now, business evolved to being a container handling facility. They are not authorized by the Port Authority to be a container handling facility, right? Now, there's a need for that facility because you bring in heavy cargo for oil and gas, So heavy pressure vessel, heavy pipeline, oil and gas equipment, which service the oil and gas companies in the area, right? So, but they need to be regularized, all right? So there's a need for Port Authority to scan the whole coastline. And we don't want somebody to just put out a jetty or a pier without doing relevant studies. And this is why they need to come to Port Authority and they need to check and see that what they do is building in conformance with the law.
I wanted to ask, as you mentioned the scenario at Karana, so this is not an isolated incident, is it? So there's several other examples of this?
There could be, there are slipways, dry docking facilities. Caridoc had a slipway facility that is defunct, but they have the floating dry dock now. But they are the government facility. When it's kind of coast, Waterloo, there's the Carillion had a base there where they also supply. You go further down, Guapo. We see these port operations they're setting up on the coast, right? So from there it evolves to something bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's become an issue afterwards if we don't regulate it. So it's an unregulated sector.
Understood. Yeah. Member Dr. Chaitamraj?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Aside from you've listed environmental implications of these unauthorized ports, there's a financial implication in terms of revenues lost to the port authority?
Yeah, there's a fiscal hemorrhage we're looking at here because basically it's an opportunity for being a regulator. It's like the airport authority. Airport authority is very profitable, right? Port authority is on the other side, but they're breaking even with the operating. But if they get have all the revenue streams, they'll be very profitable.
Okay, thank you. I just wish to invite Member Mohit. I believe she may have had a question. No, you didn't? All right, okay, good. This question is specifically for the CEO of Pacinco, Mr. Oliver. So in your strategic plan, it was stated that one of the main challenges faced by the port is regional competition, as we've heard, and that the port is unable to receive larger vessels transiting through the Panama Canal. Have there been any proposals for remedying these infrastructural shortcomings, and especially as it relates to berthing and docking of large vessels, sorry?
Hello, Chair. Could you just repeat the last section of the question? I didn't get it.
The question is, have there been any proposals to deal with the infrastructural challenges, particularly with the berthing and docking of vessels?
Okay. At this point in time, no, because and why I will say no is because prior to this administration, there was a PPP talk, and the intention was that that private operator would have provided capital equity because such development for a port is a highly capital investment entity. Case in point, the current infrastructure along the port of Spain requires dredging and quay wall development to develop the port to accommodate what we call the post-Panamax vessels. Currently, our draft is published as 11 meters. These vessels require drafts 15 and 16 meters. That type of activity require investment on terms of TT money in excess of 100 million TT dollars. The port at this point doesn't have that type of, that is just for the quay wall infrastructure. Dredging, you're looking at closer to 300 million TT dollars. So it was the intention that had the private operator come in, that they would have provided equity in terms of that form of the development. Now, with the revitalization plan, I suspect something similar will be looked at. So while we are existing, we are basically upkeeping our existing infrastructure. But in terms of developing the infrastructure to cater for the larger vessels, at this point in time, we cannot do it. The existing infrastructure will become unstable.
So just to confirm, the approach is just to maintain the status quo?
At this point in time, yes.
So are there any further questions? Okay, great. So at this stage, I wish to invite Ms. Charles-Elbourne to give us some brief closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and members, for the opportunity to come before you today. And those of you online who have tuned in, I wish to thank you as well. I want to close by saying the port is built on a number of strategic partnerships and networks. To propel the port into the era of efficiency and modern operationalization requires strategic partnerships. It requires significant investment. We at the port are committed to this and achieving this, but we are also cognizant of the fact that that capital investment that is required, for example, to do the berth expansions and dredging, requires significant investment. The Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago is committed to maintaining its existing operations, but we have significant plans and visions. And one of the key things is that we want to be fully financially sustainable. We want that we don't have to come to the government to get money if we have to do a major capital investment. We want to set the tone for the region as well. We see a lot of development in Jamaica, and this is happening through shipping partnerships with major lines such as CMA, CGM. The Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago can accomplish and be the best regional port, the best international port, but that requires us to align ourselves with the strategic partners who can make that investment. I thank you for the opportunity to come before you today, Chairman and your members. I thank you for the questions posed, and you do have our commitment on behalf of the board, the management, and our employees that we are always going to show up every day and deliver and put our best foot forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Charles-Elbourne. And now I would like to also invite Mr. Ramdahin to give us some closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, for giving us the opportunity and my team to participate at today's event. The ministry is basically working very closely with all our state entities in terms of improving their operational efficiencies, trying to debottleneck the operations and identify the areas where we need to invest to basically enhance their operational performance, as well as increase their capacity to earn revenue. We are investing a lot to help the port to improve, but once we get them to become operationally efficient, rather than the taxpayers paying for the operation, they only pay the back funds to us to basically support the society. So you have our commitment that we will work very closely with them to basically improve and enhance the operation.
Okay, and I would also like to thank you, all of the stakeholders, for your attendance and for sharing your invaluable knowledge and experience with the committee. I know we had a lot of questions for you, and I'm so appreciative of all the information you've shared with us. I would like to thank the committee members for your contributions to our deliberations, and to the Office of the Parliament for the tremendous support that we have, logistical support and procedural support. And thank you also to the members of the viewing and listening public. And at this time, I'd like to bring our meeting to a close.